What if I told you that deep in the Egyptian desert, archaeologists uncovered walls with secret chambers, older than the pyramids? That one fortress near the Nile revealed a discovery so advanced it challenged what we thought Egypt could build 4,000 years ago. And that, hidden in a royal inscription, lies a mystery connecting ancient military architecture to forgotten gods. This isn't in your school textbooks, but it's all real, and it comes from a single book, written by an Egyptologist who spent decades decoding the invisible walls of Egypt's past. Ready to uncover what history never told you? You've heard about the pyramids, the temples, the pharaohs and their tombs. But what if I told you ancient Egypt wasn't just a land of gods and gold? It was also a land of walls, fortresses, and warfare. Forget the myths about aliens and secret chambers. The truth is far more human and far more impressive. This is the story of Egypt's lost military genius, the forgotten fortresses that protected a civilization for over 2,000 years. Long before pyramids touched the sky, Egypt was a patchwork of small kingdoms. In these early times, the Predynastic period, power was fragile, and survival meant defending your grain, your people, your river. And that's where the first walls appeared. Not giant castles, but strategic enclosures, mud brick walls around settlements. Simple, but powerful. The earliest known? At a place called Hierakonpolis, where archaeologists found a massive fortified enclosure from over 5,000 years ago. Egyptians weren't building pyramids yet. They were building to survive. With the rise of the first dynasties, Egypt unified under kings who became pharaohs. These rulers weren't just religious figures, they were generals. Kings like Narmer and Djoser knew that controlling Egypt meant securing its borders. They built fortified cities, checkpoints, and military outposts. In the desert, near today's Sudan, they constructed massive mud brick fortresses to control trade routes and defend against Nubian kingdoms. One famous example? The fortresses of Buhen, Semna, and Mergessa, powerful garrisons on the Nile. Far from the tourist trails, these were Egypt's front lines. Defensive walls 10 meters high, towers, bastions, and even moats. Built by engineers who mastered not just stone, but strategy. As Egypt expanded south into Nubia and pushed east toward the Sinai, it needed more than temples. It needed a military network. That's exactly what the Middle Kingdom pharaohs created. They didn't just build monuments. They built a logistical system of fortresses linked by the Nile. These acted like checkpoints, supply depots, and control centers. Imagine a river highway with military bases every few kilometers. Messages, goods, and soldiers moving like clockwork. It was Egypt's version of a modern military infrastructure. In the Sinai, they built defensive walls around mining camps and desert routes, protecting not just people, but gold, turquoise, and copper. We often see walls as just barriers, but in ancient Egypt, fortresses were living ecosystems. Inside Buhen, for example, a military city near the Second Cataract, archaeologists uncovered traces of residential quarters, administrative buildings, storage silos, and even religious spaces. Soldiers lived with their families. There were ovens for baking, rooms for writing reports on papyrus, and basins for ritual purification. Life inside these fortresses was strict, but not lifeless. Children were born behind the walls. Officers trained recruits. Scribes recorded everything, from grain rations to patrol routes. Even far from Memphis or Thebes, the state was present, watching, organizing, providing. In the east, new powers were rising. The Hyksos, for example, came from Canaan and brought war chariots. Suddenly, Egypt was vulnerable. During these turbulent times, the Egyptians didn't just defend, they learned. They rebuilt stronger walls, used imported technologies, and began developing counteroffensives. This led to the New Kingdom, Egypt's Golden Age. where pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramses II didn't just build fortresses, they led armies across borders. Egypt became an empire, but it never forgot the value of fortified defense. The Egyptians didn't build randomly. Every fortress was placed with geographic intention. On narrow riverbanks to control crossings, on cliffs to overlook trade paths, near mines to protect resources, near cataracts to slow down invaders. The landscape became part of the defense. Take Semna. It wasn't just a wall, it was part of a bottleneck strategy. The Nile narrows, the cliffs rise, invaders are forced into a trap. Franck Monnier calls it a territorial strategy using natural barriers as extensions of the fortress. The desert itself became a weapon. Many fortresses mentioned in ancient texts have never been found. Some are buried under Nile silt, others lie beneath modern cities like Aswan or Elephantine. One fortress, known only through inscriptions at Karnak, was said to have been built in the land of the Bow, deep in Nubia, but no trace has ever been located. And then there are ruins in the eastern desert, massive stone foundations without inscriptions, far from any known site. Were they military, religious, something else? Monnier reminds us, the silence of archaeology does not mean absence, only that we have not yet asked the right question. Every ruin could hold secrets. Every unearthed brick could spark a discovery. Every unnamed wall, a mystery still waiting. In the New Kingdom, pharaohs became warrior kings. They built fortress cities like Pyramesses, which became both military HQs and political centers. Even temple architecture mirrored this shift. Massive pylons, high walls, guarded entrances. Temples looked like fortresses. Order, surveillance, control. The army wasn't outside religion, it was part of it. To rule was to protect. Many of Egypt's fortresses weren't just military posts, they were storytellers in stone. On temple walls and stelae, pharaohs proudly recorded their military victories. But hidden among grand battle scenes are also stories of fortresses under siege, border patrols, and secret missions from the military frontier. Let's start with one of the most vivid, the inscriptions at Semna. Semna, one of the massive Middle Kingdom fortresses in Nubia, didn't just control trade routes. It was the empire's southern nerve center. And on a stone tablet known as the Semna Dispatch, officials recorded the movements of Nubian groups beyond the fortress walls. In one chilling entry, a Nubian party was spotted trying to cross into Egyptian territory. The local commander sent troops immediately, captured the intruders, and logged the entire event like a military police report. They were seized, not one escaped. They were questioned, and they admitted their intent to raid the granaries. This shows the level of organization, surveillance, and communication in Egypt's military machine, centuries before similar systems would appear elsewhere. Another striking example comes from the Stela of Senusret III, the great warrior pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom. On his inscription near the fortress of Urinardi, Senusret III declares, "No Nubian shall pass this place, going downstream or upstream, by water or by land." This wasn't just propaganda, it was policy. Enforced by stone and sword, his fortresses became customs checkpoints, military barriers, and psychological markers of imperial control. His words weren't only aimed at the Nubians, but at his own commanders. Any commander who allows them to pass will no longer be of my service. It's one of the earliest known examples of military accountability laws inscribed publicly. And then there's Ramses II, whose campaigns are among the best documented of the ancient world. While most know the dramatic Battle of Kadesh, few realize that Ramses also built a network of forts along Egypt's northeastern frontier, in the region of Jaru, modern-day Tel Hebua. This city fortress was the launchpad for military operations against Canaanite cities and the Hittite Empire. Inscriptions discovered in the area describe garrison rotations, war chariot movements, and royal inspection tours. Jaru wasn't just a wall, it was Egypt's forward command center. and Ramses made sure his legacy was carved into the stone gates. He is shown smiting foreign enemies before the walls, declaring himself the bull, mighty in battle, defender of Egypt's borders. In other texts, we find mentions of the Wall of the Ruler, a massive defensive line that protected Egypt from incursions by nomadic tribes from the east, known as the Shasu. These were not myth, but early border walls combining watchtowers and desert patrols. Even the tale of Sinuhe, a fictional story written in the Middle Kingdom, references border fortresses when Sinuhe flees Egypt. He writes of passing through a guarded checkpoint. "I crouched in the bushes for fear that the watchman on the walls would see me." This shows how deeply embedded the image of fortified borders was in the Egyptian imagination. All these inscriptions, real or literary, remind us of something crucial. Egypt's fortresses weren't just physical barriers. They were symbols of control, instruments of state surveillance, and places where strategy met story. They watched the world and recorded it in stone. Stand before a ruined Egyptian fortress today, and you won't find gold or sarcophagi. You'll find crumbling bricks, battered gates, collapsed towers swallowed by the desert. But if you look closer, if you listen, these ruins speak. They tell us that Egypt's greatness didn't just rise in the form of temples and tombs. It also stood behind walls. It endured in dust-filled watchtowers, in the echoes of boots on mud brick floors, in the records of patrols scratched onto limestone. Franck Monnier's work reminds us that Egypt was not only a civilization of belief, it was a civilization of defense. These fortresses were where politics met engineering, where logistics met landscape, where strategy shaped stone. And unlike the monuments of eternity, these walls were always temporary, always vulnerable, always tested. Some were overrun, some abandoned, some forgotten for millennia. But together they form a network of resilience. They show us that Egypt was never passive. It was vigilant, proactive, and surprisingly modern in its understanding of power, space, and security. Behind every divine king was a very human army, organized, supplied, and protected by structures that stretched from the Delta to Nubia and from Sinai to the Western Desert. So when we walk the ruins today, we're not just visiting battle sites. We're stepping into a military mind that could map a landscape, read a threat, and carve a response into the earth itself. Egypt's temples spoke of eternity. Its pyramids whispered to the gods. But its fortresses, they shouted across deserts, "We are still here, and we are prepared." From the pre-dynastic age to the New Kingdom, these structures reflect not just engineering, but strategic brilliance. They were more than walls. They were statements of sovereignty. So next time someone tells you Egypt was just about pyramids, tell them about the walls, because while temples prayed for the afterlife, fortresses protected the living.